Imagine me actually sticking to a regular upload schedule. Like, just imagine that. I got a new laptop specifically for video editing, but kind of neglected the fact that I'm a contractor and free time is incredibly difficult to find. I mean, I guess that's part of it, you know. Some of it is a me problem. Anywho, hi squad, welcome back, and dog bless you. I'm gonna aim to get 2 shorter videos done this month, partially because I want to. Also to teach myself that I am in fact allowed to focus on one topic at a time. Not the guy. I mean, he's great, but you know, I just want to teach myself that I am allowed to just kind of do one thing, just one, that is okay. Also, I had surgery the day before yesterday, so if I seem kind of like tired and out of it or my voice sounds weird, it's because there was a tube in my throat and, you know, I'm kind of tired. I'm kind of tender. Okay, but on to the thing. Before I get into today's topic, it should be stressed that I am not a psychologist or a therapist or a mental health professional in any capacity. My professional skill set mostly revolves around picking things up and putting them down in a way that makes your meat strong. So please kind of think of this as more of a parasocial empathy party rather than a diagnostic tool. Please do not use this video as a diagnostic tool. Thank you. But where were the signs? I think a lot of queer people get this response or similar responses from friends and family when they start kind of openly talking about their identities or, you know, if coming out is your thing, officially come out. Part of this comes from stereotypes surrounding queer people, but we're not going to talk about those today. Instead, what I want to talk about is that good old squeaky wheel gets the grease thinking that tends to persist at the detriment of queer people who maybe struggle with boundaries or are people pleasers or just generally aren't that assertive. For those of us who fall into the non-squeaky camp, which I would personally argue is the much larger one, we tend to not address the incongruencies between our identities and the world around us. This is either because we don't want to inconvenience the people around us, assume that some level of constant discomfort is just the normal baseline, or both. Most humans have a desire to cooperate with the people around them. So when the majority of the messages we receive about what normal functioning looks like center cisgender heterosexual people, that becomes the basis for what cooperation should look like. Which means that the more someone deviates from that archetype, the more inherently uncooperative they seem just by existing. I like to think about it like paths in the woods. The ones most walked offer the smoothest course, and very few people are natural trailblazers. Going off the beaten path comes with a whole host of exhausting demands that most people just are not equipped to deal with, especially not on their own. This is why a great many queer people don't actually come to terms with their identities until they're surrounded by a peer group that shares them. It's a lot less scary to go stomping off into the forest when you can do so as a group. Unfortunately, just by the nature of the world that we live in, the majority of queer narratives that have been available for consumption up to this point tend to be built pretty heavily around a certain amount of assertiveness that's just assumed, and some level of suffering pretty much all the time. What I'm getting at is that because in the past, because leading up till now, queer representatives had to be bold and assertive and really put themselves out there to get noticed, this is kind of written into the script of what it is to be a queer person. We're not really given the space to not be trailblazers. If your transgender son didn't throw a tantrum every time you tried to put him in a dress, is he really trans? Your lesbian sister dated guys in high school, so is she really a lesbian? Maybe you yourself are abisexual and you doubt yourself because you've only ever been in straight passing relationships. We tend to react to queer identities by wondering why they didn't meet certain criteria rather than asking ourselves what barriers may have been at play to stop that from happening. And I say we because people under the umbrella aren't safe from this thinking either. We are all implicitly taught to follow it. What I'm hoping we can do is maybe spend a little bit more time acknowledging the fact that charging off into the woods on your own is a little bit scary and therefore most people probably wouldn't want to do it. Maybe we could spend a little bit more time discussing the natural human tendency to want to fit in with the people around you. Maybe when someone shares their truth with you, you shouldn't question it, but rather spend a little bit of time thinking back on all of the cooperative behaviors that person has exhibited in the past. Maybe there was something that got in the way of them telling you sooner. If you're watching this as a queer person rather than an ally, maybe you need to drop the should-haves and if-onlys and recognize that the only mistake that you made was wanting to fit in with the people around you. Look at the toolkit that you were provided by your culture and ask yourself what needed to be added to it before you felt really equipped to live your truth. And some of you might not be there yet, so it might be worthwhile to ask yourselves what tools you still need. It is not okay to expect queer people, especially queer children, to be their own fiercest advocates in a world that is stacked against them. Many of us are by necessity, but it takes a fair amount of time to get there. The squeaky wheels are not the majority, just more noticeable by their very nature. And it's important not to conflate something being more obvious with it being more common. In my own experience, I was never really the kind of person to make a fuss, and it took me a pretty long time to draw the line between my trans identity and my struggles with boundaries. Put more bluntly, I grew up compromising my identity on behalf of others to the point that violations of lesser boundaries just didn't really feel like that much by comparison. I was the trans boy being put in dresses as a kid. Not often, mind you, but on special occasions. And I remember hating it, but keeping that feeling to myself, because I knew it's what everyone else wanted, or at the very least expected for the sake of ease. It was less effort for me to deal with my own negative feelings about what was going on than to risk taking on the negative feelings of everyone around me by causing a fuss. At least with my own emotional experiences, I was guaranteed hold on the reins. But what developed from this was a tendency to be a control freak within my own bubble and to struggle a little bit with boundaries outside of it. Now, I'm a sample size of 1, and there's no way for me to know for sure whether or not things would have been different had I come out in childhood or just not even been queer in the first place. But I am about 98% sure that growing up trans in a cis world made it really, really difficult for me to determine just how much space I'm entitled to in a given situation. When your very existence is seen as an inconvenience, you are forced to do extra work to satisfy the expectations surrounding cooperation. Simply not doing that extra work anymore can make it feel like you're taking something away from people, but you never had to give anything in the first place. It takes time to learn it, but you're not asking for extra just by being yourself. You're just asking for the same amount that everyone else gets after being accustomed to settling for less. So if you're an ally, especially if you're the parent of a queer child, don't ask them where the signs were. Instead, ask yourself what steps they may have felt they had to take for the sake of ease and fitting in. And if you're a queer person, please remember that you are not asking for more, you are not demanding special treatment, and you're not an inconvenience. If it feels like that, it's probably because you're hyper aware of what it's like to have to compromise yourself on behalf of others. It's very understandable that you'd want to avoid doing that to someone, but you gotta start by making sure that you're not doing it to yourself. I'm gonna leave it there for now. I hope that your Pride Month has been and continues to be wonderful. If you're still living undercover, please remember that this month is for you as well. And the world is a lot brighter with you in it. Thanks for watching.